All right, let's start inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable this gathering to be in our scale of good deeds. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward you for the time that you spare for His sake. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept the effort we put forth, enable us to learn lessons that we can adopt and apply in our day-to-day lives. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to exit from this gathering with hearts more steadfast on the path, more loving of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more following of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. All right, so today's session is titled Arming Ourselves. And the question that we hope to answer is, how do we arm ourselves against the three evils that our scholars warned us against? Our nafs, dunya, and shaitan. And what does Hajj got to do with this? And how can we learn from the experience of the Hujjaj in arming ourselves? So that is the session for today. Previously, alhamdulillah, we covered the opportunity of Hajj, how that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens doors of opportunities for us to come closer to Him. And Hajj is one such opportunity for the Hujjaj themselves and for everybody else all over the world to learn about Hajj, to benefit from the experience of Hajj, even if we haven't attended it ourselves or performed it ourselves. And how, that Hajj is relevant to all of us despite not having gone to Hajj. That was part one. Part two, we talked about the zuhd of the Hujjaj, the word zuhd meaning to not have dunya in our hearts, but instead to have it in our hands. It's not about living a life of austerity or to live an impoverished lifestyle or a simple lifestyle. It is in fact to live a decent lifestyle, inshallah, without crossing the line into extravagance, but also of not being so keen on this dunya that it's in our hands that we can let go of it at any point in time, we can sacrifice it at any point in time. That's what Zuhd is all about. And we highlighted and focused on the hadith of Salman al-Farisi, where he talks about balance, anh, and how the Prophet said, Sadaqa Salman, Salman spoke the truth. That was part two. Today, inshallah, we'll talk about arming ourselves. All right, so let's dive in. And before we go into the actual, quotation about the three evils that our scholars warn us about, before we go there and before we talk about different remedies for it, we want to touch upon a few aspects of Hajj, right, that we kind of stopped at. And we particularly talked about Ihram, we talked about tent city, Mina, we talked about how the kafan, right, is represented in the ihram clothing, right, the two pieces of cloth, the izar and the rida, and how those two pieces of cloth kind of represent the kafan, the piece of cloth that a body is wrapped in. And we talked about so many different aspects there. So let's touch upon one of the key pillars of Hajj, and that is Arafah, right, the day of Arafah. The day of Arafah is actually a key pillar for Hajj, because the Prophet is reported to have said, Al-Hajju Arafah, meaning that Hajj cannot be completed without Arafah. It is a key cornerstone, if you like. In fact, there are many aspects of Hajj that can be made up as in, if they're missed for any reason, you can make them up later, or they could be, you could do something in its place in a way, right? But not Arafah, not the standing on the plain of Arafat and being there on the day of Arafah, which is the day of the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, the month of Dhul Hijjah, and it is right before the day of Eid, right before the day of Eid. So what happens there? Well, the Hujjaj gather, right? The pilgrims, all of them that have come from all corners of the world, from every fajjin amiq, as we mentioned in part one, we talked about how they come from every deep crevice in the earth, from every deep corner, from every faraway place. And we mentioned the very interesting comment that deep crevice could also mean that when we fall short and when we commit sins ourselves, we may have fallen through the cracks. We may have allowed ourselves to lose track, lose sight, to deviate. But then even then, we're invited to come and perform Hajj and cleanse ourselves, purify ourselves, ask for forgiveness, repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So people of the world, subhanAllah, in the millions, gather on the Mount of Arafat, in the plain over there, and they, it's so crowded, subhanAllah, and so hot, and yet people are there and gathered, and they make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pretty much the whole time. And up to then al-Maghrib, after which the Hujjaj then head down to al-Muzdalifah, to a different place. But there, the plain or the area of Arafat, it is, our scholars say, a reminder of the Day of Judgment. It is a reminder of the Day of Judgment because, subhanAllah, that's when we will all be gathered. We will all be resurrected. All human beings, all throughout time, all throughout history, will be resurrected on the Day of Judgment. And just as we will gather on the Day of Judgment, likewise the Hajjaj every year gather on Mount Arafah. And the main concern for the Hajjaj is themselves. They're concerned primarily for themselves. Every Hajj right then and there at Arafat are concerned for themselves. They're making dua for themselves. But not only that, they're also making dua for loved ones. They're also making dua for the ummah at large, right? But the main concern is themselves, asking Allah for forgiveness. And you find, subhanAllah, this is a very common scene to see. You find the pilgrims standing there, hot, sweaty, tired, exhausted, subhanAllah. They've already, spent nights away from home. They're already in a state of ihram for a number of days. They haven't, kind of rested or had, the usual comforts of life. All of that has been sacrificed, subhanAllah, for quite some time already. And you find them making dua, and you find tears flowing. Because this is a maqam or a station that the Prophet stood at, a place the Prophet stood at where he spoke, alayhi salatu wasalam. So there they are in the footsteps of the Prophet, and their emotions are high, subhanAllah. It's very common to see people, really, really, have tears flowing from their eyes profusely, subhanAllah, to the extent that people with beards, men with beards, their beards would become wet, subhanAllah. A very common sight. And it is because they're really begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, really beseeching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, really asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here we want to kind of just shed some light or touch upon the idea of making dua, because dua is part and parcel of Hajj, part and parcel of Umrah, to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does it mean to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Well, it means to ask Allah, right? You're asking Allah for things. You know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the master of the universe, that He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of the universe, that He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Lord of the universe, that He is Rabbul Alameen, the Lord of the worlds. You know that He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the sustainer, the provider, the cherisher. He's the one that has all matters, all powers in His control. And so you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for things. But dua has been unfortunately misconstrued by many. It has been construed to be perceived as perhaps the only thing that one can do, right? To the extent that if somebody's going through hardship or difficulty, the advice sometimes given is make dua. Just make dua, right? In fact, one of the sad, perhaps, reflections or comments or pieces of advice that is given about a very dire situation, right? Our brothers and sisters in Gaza, for example, or our brothers and sisters in Myanmar, or brothers and sisters in the concentration camps in China, right? The Uyghur brothers and sisters, all of those different brothers and sisters all over the world that are going through hardship and pain. Right now, our brothers and sisters in Bangladesh, our brothers and sisters in Kashmir, our brothers and sisters in India, many different parts of the world, subhanAllah, we have many Muslims that are going through severe hardship and difficulty. Sometimes the advice given is just make dua. That's all you owe your fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, is to make dua for them. And that's all you can do. But that's not true, because dua actually needs to be correlated with action, because that's what we are. We are an ummah of action. And that means that we do our very best with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us with. And this applies to our day-to-day lives too. Like, if you are hungry, for example, you don't just simply sit on the couch and make dua and say, Allah bless me with a very, tasty sandwich and expect it to happen. It won't happen unless you rise up, go to the fridge, open it up, look at the ingredients, find some bread, make a sandwich for yourself, and then eat it. And even then, once you've done all of that, you cannot guarantee that you'll actually enjoy that meal. You can't guarantee that you'll actually benefit, nourish yourself from that meal. And so we make dua before, during, and after. And so the idea is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the means to try to attain what we are making dua for. But we still make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a very interesting concept called tawakkul, right? To rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a man came to the Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, should I, tie my camel, or atawakkal ala Allah, just rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the Prophet said, aqilha wa tawakkal. Tie the camel and tawakkal ala Allah. Meaning you do both. You do your very best, right? You have a camel and you're worried that it might, run astray or get lost in the desert. So what do? You tie it and you ask Allah for protection. You ask Allah for help, right? You do both. You do both. That's the attitude of the true believer. We don't, believe that dua is like some kind of magical word or some kind of spell or some kind of hocus pocus. No, we don't believe in that. Some people, they're so keen on this that they search for what are the words, right? What are the magical words that will make things happen? right? They look around and they like, okay, let's dig in. Let's try to see, is there a hadith where the Prophet told us of a specific wording to use, and that's the wording that will make things happen, right? No, but that's not the case. It's not like that, right? Like we search and yearn to use specific phrases that were used by the prophets and used by our beloved Prophet Muhammad alayhi to attain closeness to the prophets, to attain closeness to the Prophet alayhi, right? Because we know that that phrasing is perhaps the best phrasing, because after all, it is said by the best of people, right? The prophets themselves, alayhim salam, and our beloved Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, they used these words in their dua, in their supplication. But it doesn't mean that it has more power, right? Because the power is not in the words. The power isn't in who said the words. The power is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So somebody that could be perhaps, illiterate, doesn't know how to read and write, doesn't know the phrasing of a hadith or phrasing of a dua, right, that used by any of the prophets or used by our beloved Prophet, but he would be sincere in their dua, in their supplication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then what happens? They need to correlate it with their best action forward, right? The best action forward. And so they do their best action, they ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what they need, and they leave the results in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So that's tawakkul. That's true reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You do your very best with what Allah blessed you with. Another example is somebody that is about to, go to a certain destination. They're going to travel somewhere, right? So they enter their car, and you don't expect them to simply not turn on the ignition and not drive. You expect them to, do all of that. But what if they don't? What if they just say, Ya Allah, enable me to reach my destination? And then they wait, right? It's not going to happen unless they actually do what Allah blessed them with, use what Allah blessed them with. Allah blessed them with a car, they need to use the car. Allah blessed them with the ability to, use that car and drive that car, the eye-hand coordination to be able to drive, right? All of that they need to use to their best of abilities. Perhaps they need to, bring out some maps so that they, kind of path and draw the course that they'll take, the route that they'll take, and choose the best path, right? So everything are means, right? Tools Allah bless us with. Using these means and these tools is part and parcel of tawakkul, right? And before, during, and after, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for barakah, we ask Allah for health, we ask Allah to enable to these blessings to continue, because at any point in time, any of these blessings could go, subhanAllah, right? Somebody could be driving, and in the middle of driving, maybe they get struck by a stroke, or maybe, a heart attack, or, subhanAllah, like the body that they relied on, the car could break down, right? The car that they rely on, anything could happen that is beyond their control. So we use our sense of control to our best of abilities, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help and protection all throughout the way. That's what true dua is. And I mentioned dua, this is one of the conditions of dua, right? To correlate it with our best actions. So when it comes to our brothers and sisters in Gaza or any part of the Muslim world that are going through hardship and difficulty, we need to correlate our action with our best effort forward, right? So here, for example, if we're in Canada, miles away, that does not mean that we're separate, no, there are opportunities to stand up for our brothers and sisters, opportunities to perhaps try to pressure our current government to step in or to demand a ceasefire, and opportunities to, for political engagement, opportunities for, boycotting, products that come from, occupied territories. We have, all these opportunities, all these chances, all these things that we can do to try to make a difference in that direction. And so on the plain of Arafat, the Hajj, they are making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because it's a blessed spot. And there are blessed places where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given, and blessed times, right? Blessed times in the year and blessed places wherein the dua is, closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And we need to also make dua when we are certain of the response of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. مُوقِنُونَ الْإِجَابَةِ, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, that you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then he doesn't say that, oh Muhammad, tell them that I'll respond. No, he says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. If my servants ask you about me, I am indeed near, right? And then he says, فَلْيَدْعُوا لِي, let them call upon me, right? وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداعي إذا دعان. I respond to the dua of the caller and the one that is supplicating the dua, and the one that's making supplication when they make the supplication, right? فليستجيبوا لي, let them respond to me. وليؤمنوا بي, let them believe in me, right? And so this is all part and parcel of dua. Now, of course, dua is a big topic. We can talk about it for hours, but it's just to highlight, right, that when we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it needs to be correlated with action. So what does that mean? Now the Prophet teaches us, alayhi salatu wasalam, that even if our shoe were to be, broken or torn up, and we need to mend it. Today we don't mend our shoes. Like, the cobbler, for example, is one of those jobs that is now gone extinct. You don't find anybody that is a cobbler anymore, right? That repairs shoes. But if somebody is in need of such a thing, they make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet said, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's it, and you expect the shoe to mend itself. No, you put the effort to mend your shoe, right? And so when it comes to asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, how can we correlate that with action? Well, you correlate it with action by striving to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that you don't repeat the mistake again, so that you are truly ashamed of the sin that you're asking forgiveness about, so that you truly are seeking that whatever person you've wronged, you will, try to mend that relationship. You'll try to correct and right the wrong that happened. That's asking for forgiveness. What about asking for other people, things for other people, like, may Allah, bless this person with health? Well, these are things that are beyond your control, right? You can't bless anybody with health, but you can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless that person with health. If somebody is sick, may Allah cure them. But you can participate, for example, in helping somebody reach a cure if they are in need of, so for example, somebody to give them solace, if you have the skill set, if you're a doctor, if you're a scientist, or whatnot, right? So in other words, we use our skills to the best of our abilities, and everybody has varying skills and varying abilities, but we use our skills and abilities to the best of our abilities as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with. And then we go to Muzdalifah, and in Muzdalifah we do something very interesting. There, the Hajjaj will actually spend the night. Muzdalifah now is an open field, is an open area, right? And it is kind of between Arafah and the tent city of Mina, right? So they will go to Muzdalifah and they will spend the night there, and they will pick, interestingly, some rocks from Muzdalifah, right? They'll be picking rocks from Muzdalifah, and they won't use it right away. They will use it the next day, right? So basically, the whole night of Muzdalifah is spent until the Fajr of the next day, which is the day of Eid for us. For them, it is called the day of sacrifice, Yawmun Nahr, right? For the Hajjaj, it's called the day of sacrifice. So all that night, what are they doing? Well, normally they would sleep, they make dua, they would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, recite Quran, they would do the, fara'id, the obligatory prayers, they do nawafil, extra prayers, they could do all of the different things, right, during their time in Muzdalifah, but it's open air, right? There's no tents. So even the comforts of the tents, which is already a step down from the comforts of our luxurious beds and homes, right? Already there are tents in Tent City in Mina. Now they are, even that sacrifice is made to become even stronger. And they're now going to spend time, right, overnight in an open area. And so, subhanAllah, it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the rituals of Hajj, is teaching the Hajjaj and us all over the world to take zuhd, to the next level, right? And also to take it gradually, right? So, subhanAllah, it's almost like we're taking things gradually, step by step, right? First step of the zuhd and sacrifice, and to take a few steps away from dunya, is to take away the comforts of our clothing, right? So now we're wearing, uncomfortable clothing, right? The ihram clothing, part of the ihram, right? In addition to the niyyah, is the clothing. So that's step one. Step two is we're going to spend the night in a tent, no longer in our own homes. Now I know that tents today are very luxurious and comfortable, but that wasn't the case at the time of the Prophet. But then so now tents, not in our comforts of our homes, or not in the comforts of our beds. So we're taking a few more steps back. But now, even more of a step back, not even in the comforts of our tents, right? For one night, we're spending it in open air. SubhanAllah. So shunning of the dunya there, right? And then there's the picking up of the rocks. And here comes perhaps the session of today, or the focus of today, inshallah, and that is to arm ourselves against a shaitan. Now, these pebbles or these rocks, right, these jamarat, as they are picked up from Muzdalifah to be used the next day, right? Yawmun Nahr, the day of sacrifice. In Yawmun Nahr, a few things happen. There's the first rami of a jamarat happens, right? And so there will be, 7 pebbles that will be thrown, and other things happen as well. There's the slaughtering of the animal, there's the halq, there's the shaving, right? So a few other things happen. But what we are interested in is this, kind of symbolic gesture of throwing rocks against a shaitan. Now, literally, it's not happening. Like, the shaitan is not there for us to go to and throw rocks at, but it commemorizes, right, what happened with Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he felt temptation from the shaitan in more than one instance during the whole journey. And he himself picked up these pebbles and threw them at the shaitan, right? And saying, A'udhu billahi minash shaitan rajim. So this is exactly what we are commemorating. And we're learning from this that we need to do something similar to this. Now, we're physically doing it, but it symbolizes something that we need to do in our day-to-day lives. And that is that we will arm ourselves against a shaitan. Now, what does this actually mean? Now, Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, in his very pivotal seminal work called Ihya Ulum al-Din, the revival of the Islamic sciences, he says, أعداء الإنسان ثلاثة. The enemy of human being are three. دنياه وشيطانه ونفسه. That person's dunya, that person's life, that person's shaitan, and that person's self. So then he says, فاحترس من الدنيا بالزهد فيها. So arm yourself or kind of protect yourself from dunya by being or having this zuhd, which we talked about last time, right? To shun the dunya by not having it in your heart, right? By taking a few steps from the luxuries and extravagances, by not crossing the line into israf, into extravagance, by ensuring that you can, even the comforts of dunya that you do have, you can set aside, you can sacrifice that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's zuhd. That's number one. And he says, وَمِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ, and then you protect yourself from the shaitan بِمُخَالَفَتِهِ, by disobeying him, by going the different path, right? A different path than what he has taken. وَمِنَ النَّفْسِ, and from your nafs, you protect yourself from your nafs بِتَرْكِ الشَّهَوَاتِ, by letting go of desires, by letting go of desires. And so we learn, very interestingly, a few steps to take and how to take them when it comes to those three aspects. And then, like I said, that's the topic of today, right? How do we protect ourselves from those three? Why are those three dangerous to us, right? So number one, dunya. How is dunya dangerous to us? It is dangerous to us because it sometimes dazzles, right? It dazzles and it has adornments and it has beautiful things, and it could make us think that this is it, that this existence of ours is it, that this life is the be all end all, that you only live once. And so that attitude, subhanAllah, makes the dunya become the most important concern for us. And it becomes very dangerous for people to have the dunya as their only concern. And so we recognize that dunya is not the be all end all, right? That we as Muslims believe in the Day of Judgment and believe in the hereafter. That this dunya is simply, as the Prophet said, he says, "Ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah." That dunya is the farmland of the hereafter. And what do we do in farmlands? Well, we plant good deeds. We plant, good efforts. We put our best effort forward. We do the most hasanat that we can take, right? And so we do this. Why? Because we hope to reap the reward of our good deeds in the hereafter. And in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, the Prophet is reported to have said, alayhi salatu wassalam, من كانت الآخرة همه جعل الله غناه في قلبه وجمع له شمله وأتته الدنيا وهي راغمة ومن كانت الدنيا همه جعل الله فقره بين عينيه وفرق عليه شمله ولم يأته من الدنيا إلا ما قدر له. Translated as that whoever considers the hereafter to be their main concern, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make their richness in their hearts, and their affairs will be collected and gathered together. وَأَتَتْهُ الدُّنْيَا وَهِيَ رَاغِمَةٌ, and the dunya will come to this person, subservient to that person, because al-akhirah is their main concern, right? Dunya is not their main concern. This life is not the main concern. The hereafter is the main concern. So dunya will come to this person subservient. And then he says, but whoever has the dunya as their main concern, this life is their main concern, right? Then what happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make their own poverty right before their eyes. They will constantly see themselves deprived. They will constantly see themselves poor. They will constantly see that worry. It will be the first thing, the thing that's always on their mind: poverty, poorness, being lost, being deprived, right? وَفَرَّقَ عَلَيْهِ شَمْلَهُ, and their affairs will be scattered. وَلَمْ يَأْتِهِ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَا قُدِّرَ لَهُ, and nothing from the dunya will come to that person except what Allah has written for them. Very powerful hadith if you think about it. And it kind of highlights the idea that akhirah, the hereafter, should be our main concern. Now, does that mean at the expense of dunya? And the answer is absolutely a resounding yes, at the expense of dunya, right? Never the opposite way. Never dunya is given, never life is given more of a priority at the expense of the hereafter. right? But hereafter can be given priority at the expense of this life of ours when they conflict. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that when we're going about our lives and then a moment of conflict arises between al-akhirah and between dunya. And that means that if you were to take a certain decision, you will please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and hence elevate your ranks in the hereafter, but maybe it will come at a worldly expense, at a worldly price. Maybe you'll lose your job. Maybe you'll be discriminated against. Maybe you will be shadow banned. Maybe you will be, put on one of those websites that actually target the people that, raise the flag at protests or speak the truth in different institutions against the occupation, right? A worldly price will be paid for doing something that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, standing up to injustice, right? So then what happened? You're sacrificing dunya for the akhirah, right? So the conflict is there. It happens, it arises. So what do you do then? Well, of course, every person, does what they're capable of to the best of their abilities. But here is a point where al-akhirah is given priority, hereafter is given a priority. What about vice versa? Maybe there's a decision to take, and it will give you a lavish lifestyle. It'll give you wealth. It'll give you comfort, maybe even fame and glory. But it will come at the expense of displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then that means lowering your ranks in the hereafter. And maybe lowering it so much so that you become amongst the dwellers of hellfire. So then the choice is clear, right? There's no question about it. There's no hesitation about it. I'm not going to sacrifice my hereafter for my dunya, right? Like, what's the point? And I'm reminded of something very interesting. It is said that in a moment of turmoil in the Muslim world, there was a Sahabi that was actually killed, and it was Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Abdullah ibn Zubayr was killed, and it was because he disapproved and in fact led a rebellion against the person that kind of nominated and put themselves as the Khalifa, and it was Yazid ibn Muawiyah at the time. And so it is said that a man named Hajjaj was serving the Khalifa. This Hajjaj killed Abdullah ibn Zubayr, a Sahabi. And so it is said that Hajjaj went to the mother of Abdullah ibn Zubayr, who was a Sahabiya, one of the companions of the Prophet. Her name is Asma bint Abi Bakr, the daughter of Abu Bakr, right? What do you think of what happened to your son? And she says something so profound. She said, you have done nothing except that you have ruined his dunya because you killed him. You ruined his life, but he ruined your akhirah. He ruined your hereafter, right? And so, subhanAllah, it was a powerful response by her, recognizing the weight of the hereafter and the weight of this dunya. Yes, dunya is not to be, dismissed. We're not saying that. There are many things in life that are very important. In fact, like I said, this is the farmland for the hereafter. So if you burn the farmland, then you are losing all the opportunities that you can get to serve Allah, to attain higher status, to, in fact, hurting your dunya, hurting yourself, hurting others around you that are in your life. That is, reason to lose Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's grace and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. And so we recognize that dunya is a place of trials and tribulations and tests, and a place for us to attain hasanat in this life so that we may, inshallah, rise up in our ranks and enter into the hereafter, with our heads high, so to speak, hoping and wishing for the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that's when it comes to the dunya. And how do we, reduce the negative effects of dunya upon us? Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali says, بِالزُّهْدِ فِيهَا, by not loving it, by not having it in your heart, by recognizing that you need to attain a level of zuhd. And we talked about that in detail last time. So today we'll touch upon the other two a little bit more. The first one we'll touch upon is an-nafs. What is an-nafs? An-nafs is yourself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us in such a way that we have the propensity for good or for evil, and the potential for goodness. Right? We have both. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. The nafs and how it has been fashioned. It is a miraculous fashioning, a miraculous creation, this nafs. And then he says that this nafs is inspired to do evil and to do good, to be righteous and to be, vile. It has this, potential. It could be either or. Every human being perhaps has the capacity for good and the capacity for evil. And so then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. The one that purifies himself is the one that is successful. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. The one that, reduces himself, denigrates himself, degrades himself, is the one that has failed. And so we realize that our nafs has this potential to be good and to be evil, and we need to work on ourselves so that we, kind of head in the direction of purifying our hearts. And Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali also says something very profound. He says that our nafs is of two kinds, if you like. There's a nafs al-bahimiyya wal nafs al-malaikiyya. There's an animalistic side to our nafs and an angelic side to our nafs. The animalistic side is selfish. It is greedy. It is, wants, turf and, battles over turf and over land and over, luxuries. It is lustful. It succumbs to its desires. That's the animalistic, side. Our angelic side yearns to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yearns to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yearns to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that's the two sides of us. And, which side do we give strength? Well, the side that you, kind of work on, right? And so if we tame our animalistic side and strengthen our angelic side, then we are performing what is known as tazkiyatun nafs, purification of the soul. In English, there's a very interesting saying that it's kind of similar in the lines of this, right? It says that we have two wolves inside of us, two wolves inside of us. There's the wolf that is protecting, the wolf that is brave, and then there's the other wolf that's treacherous, that's deceiving, that's conniving, right? So there's the two wolves. And these two wolves are fighting. And then the question comes, okay, well, which wolf will win the battle? And the answer is the one that you feed. The one that you feed will be the stronger one, right? So this is just an English kind of, expression, but it applies here, I think, and it's about, which side of us do we give strength to, our animalistic side or our angelic side? And this, by the way, expression is by Muhammad al-Ghazali, right? The animalistic and the angelic side. But Ali ibn Abi Talib is also reported to have said something similar, radiallahu anh, where he says that human beings are, when they actually abide by the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they obey the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they adhere to the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they shun, anything that is evil and displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they become better than angels. And this is because angels don't have a choice in the matter, right? They don't have free will. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands them to do, they do, right? And so that's the angel. But a human being chooses to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, chooses to abide by the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, chooses to stay away from that which displeases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as such, they become higher in rank than angels. But if a human being disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they become worse than animals. Because animals don't have a choice in the matter. They don't have free will. And so when they succumb to their desires and whims and, go about them, they have no free will to control their desires. And so they're animals. But those that do this as human beings, they're following the footsteps of animals, but they're even worse than animals because they neglected and set aside their consciousness, their fitrah, their purity, their free will to avoid doing that which is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it's a very interesting saying, right? And also the idea here is that if we want to strengthen our nafs against the animalistic side, the author here says, بِتَرْكِ الشَّهْوَةِ. He says, بِتَرْكِ الشَّهْوَةِ, by letting go of desires. By letting go of desires. But let's elaborate on this a little bit more. It's not just that. It's also by doing good deeds. When you do good deeds, subhanAllah, you feel something in your heart. A warmth rises in your heart. Right? This is anybody that's done anything good whatsoever, by the way, Muslim or non-Muslim, they do goodness, anything good towards anybody, they feel something inside, subhanAllah, like a light has lit up inside of them. And some people get so attached to that light, to that feeling, that they do good for that feeling. You ask them, why is it that you're so, generous? Why are you so philanthropic, right? Why are you involved in charity work? Well, they say, because I just feel good inside. Right? And so that's, subhanAllah, the reality of our existence, the reality of our creation as a species, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with this fitrah, this natural state of purity that is in each and every one of us, that we feel if we are in tune with our nafs, in tune with ourselves. We feel this goodness inside of us. And when we do good, it strengthens that side, subhanAllah. And so, but the believer doesn't do it for the feeling, because maybe doing good doesn't feel good, right? Many times we may, for example, serve, our family members. Maybe somebody has parents that are sick and tired and exhausted. And instead of, simply putting them in, a retirement home where they can be served by nurses and strangers, and maybe their privacy is not, completely intact, they decided to keep them at home and serve them himself or herself, which is difficult and causes lack of sleep and difficulty and hardship. And subhanallah, it's a very difficult situation to be in, by the way, if somebody has very old parents that they have to tend to and take care of. So, but they don't do it because it's fun. They don't do it because they enjoy it. They don't do it because it makes them feel good. Maybe they don't feel good about it, right? But they do it nonetheless, right? And so for the believer, it's not about just the feeling, because the feelings come and go. Maybe somebody has good feelings about doing good, but maybe others don't, or maybe they're not there yet, right? And subhanAllah, it's not about how we feel. It's about what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what is right, and doing it regardless, subhanAllah. But when we do this, our angelic side is strengthened. Our animalistic side is controlled, subhanAllah. And so, if we were to ask the question, how is it that we strengthen our angelic side? It's by doing good deeds. Any good deed that you can think of, any opportunity for khair, for goodness, we are in need of it. And this is something Musa alayhi salam said. He was poor, destitute. He was, kind of left his home, ran away for his life. He was now in an area that was a strange land, and he found two women that were in need of help. And he didn't go to help them for any worldly gain. He went and helped them out and provided water for them, and then rested under the tree. And he said something profound. He said, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khayrin faqir. Oh my Lord, I am poor, need the opportunity for goodness that you may bestow upon me. Scholars say opportunity for goodness is the khayr that he was talking about. He was not talking about wealth, power, position, status, fame, glory, career, job. He's not talking about that, although he got a lot of that, right? But no, it wasn't about that. He was simply asking for opportunities for khayr, and that's the attitude that we should have as believers, that whenever there's an opportunity for khayr, for goodness, they'll come knocking. We should seize that opportunity, make use of that opportunity. And we talked about that on day one, actually, the opportunities for goodness. When opportunities for goodness comes, it comes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us with them. There are those that let it go and they don't pay much attention to it because it doesn't, for example, increase their wealth, or it doesn't, for example, give them more likes or more status in worldly gains. And so they neglect it and they ignore it. And that's not the attitude of the Muslim. A Muslim strives to make use of opportunities for khair as best as they can. Any opportunity for khair, they seek it and they hold on to it. Another way to control our nafs, or to in a way not allow this aspect of our nafs to control us, is to tame the beast. Right now, that does not mean to kill the beast, right, so to speak. The animalistic side of us is not something to be shunned, not something to be ignored, because that is monasticism. That is not part of our deen. It's not part of Islam. To be a monk, to live in the mountains and live a life of austerity, that's not part of it. But to control, right? And that means to channel one's desires in the right direction through the correct channels. If somebody desires to, have a relationship, then they need to channel it through the right channels to get married, right? In accordance to the Sunnah of the Prophet, in accordance to the Quran. And so that's the channel that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enabled for it. If somebody wants to be wealthy, maybe that's the urge, maybe that's the desire to be wealthy. Then again, they channel it through the correct channels, and they work hard to attain halal income, right? To attain permissible income and become wealthy as such, no problem, right? And use that wealth in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So all of that is about channeling your desires in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What if somebody has haram desires, right? Then that's a desire that needs to be silenced and quieted down. It should not be given strength, right? We should not adopt our desires as our identity. We should not say that, oh, that makes me who I am. If I desire to shoplift, that means that's it. I'm a shoplifter. That's who I am, right? That should never be the attitude. In fact, we should quiet down that and try to compensate with a similar desire, right? And try to look down. What's the shoplifting? What is it? That desire to steal secretly, right? That exhilaration that for example, that comes with looking around and not getting caught. That joy that sometimes some thieves even feel. SubhanAllah, they find them stealing not for the item itself, not for the need of it, but for the exhilaration. You find this very often. find people that may steal something, and when they steal it, they feel, you know what, I just felt so alive doing it. It wasn't about the item, it wasn't about stealing something, it was just about the process, right? I just felt so alive that I was going to get caught, and then I wasn't, and I was able to outmaneuver, all the different ways that I could have fallen and gotten caught and all that stuff. Like, it was just so exciting, right? So you realize that the desire here, to kind of dig deep, is about maybe they live maybe a life that is perhaps not so interesting. Maybe they feel that their talents and skills are wasted in their lives because of its monotony, because of the routines that they're in. So perhaps they need to find a life that is more exhilarating, more adventurous, right? But again, in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How to use that feeling, how to live a life that is perhaps more adventurous and in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So maybe channel that in that direction, right? There's so many different things that are needed in this world of ours. Maybe perhaps travel, maybe perhaps try to help people that are going through different situations and difficult hardships all across the world, in different parts of the world, right? And subhanAllah, there are people that shy away from traveling because they're strangers and new land and new language, and I worry about all of that. But then there are others that enjoy that excitement, and they're like, new lands, new places, new faces, new languages, new people, and they find the excitement in that. So people that have that excitement, they may waste it by simply becoming tourists and traveling the world. That's a waste, I think. A better use is perhaps to go to different parts of the world where there is need to teach others, need to heal others, need to educate others, need to all of that needs that are there, different refugees camps around the world, for example, or in impoverished areas around the world. You're still traveling and experiencing different culture and languages and people, but you're also putting that to good use, subhanAllah, right? And this is just me thinking off the top of my head. If anybody has thoughts in the comments, you can feel free to share them, inshallah. So that is the idea of nafs. Last but not least is ash-shaytan. And the Prophet says a very powerful hadith about ash-shaytan. He says, إن الشيطان يجري في ابن آدم مجرى الدم فضيقوا مجاريه بالصيام. The shaitan flows in the blood of a human being just like blood. It flows in the human being just like blood. So tighten the pathways of the shaitan with fasting. Now, this hadith is not to be taken literally, it's a figure of speech, but it means that the shaitan influences us, right? He pushes us in the way to neglect our angelic side, dismiss our angelic side, give strength to our animalistic side, and transgress. He doesn't want us to have zuhd of dunya. He wants dunya to be very much deep and planted, in our hearts, right? And so the shaitan pushes in that direction and tempts in that direction and makes us follow in his footsteps. And so, we need to recognize that we need to avoid not only the shaitan and the whispers of the shaitan, but even the footsteps of the shaitan, the pathways of the shaitan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna shaytana lakum adu, fattakhiduhu aduwa. That the shaitan for you is an enemy, so take him as an enemy. إنما يدعو حزبه ليكونوا من أصحاب السعير. He invites his people, his cronies, to in the end be amongst the dwellers of hellfire. And we need to steer clear from khutuwat al-shaitan, as mentioned in the Quran, the footsteps of the shaitan. And so that means a few things. We need to first of all recognize where is it that shaitan wants us to go, right? And there's a very, very powerful book written, I believe, by Ibn al-Qayyim, titled Talbis Iblis, meaning the traps of the shaitan, the traps of the shaitan, right? The traps of Iblis. So we recognize the traps. We recognize where is it that shaitan wants us to fall into. And what is it that is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is it that is considered impermissible? We find that in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet made impermissible is al-khaba'ith, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِث, and makes prohibited for them al-khaba'ith, things that are dangerous and harmful and evil. So we study that to know what are the traps of the shaitan, where is it the shaitan wants to take us, right? And avoid that. And so it requires studying the Quran, requires knowing what is it the shaitan wants of us, where is it that he wants to take us, what direction does he want us to move into, what footsteps does he want us to follow. All of that requires a little bit of introspection, a little bit of study of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, so that we learn this, so that we may disobey the shaitan. And that's what the words of Muhammad al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he says, بِمُخَالَفَتِهِ, by disobeying and doing something different than what the shaitan has asked of you. That's how you quiet down the shaitan. The shaitan will always be whispering, right, until our last breath, subhanAllah. That's, his role in life, is to continuously be a source of influence but we can reduce that influence by not listening to the shaitan and recognizing when the shaitan is whispering. And so that requires, like I said, a little bit of introspection and studying the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And so we do that which is pleasing to Allah and avoid that which is displeasing to Allah. You can see the intersection between all three, right? Between the dunya, between the nafs and the shaitan, you see the intersection between them, and you see also the intersection between the solutions that we mentioned, right? That between az-zuhd of dunya and between controlling our desires and strengthening our angelic self and doing good deeds, and between avoiding or disobeying the shaitan. All three, there's intersections between all of that, subhanAllah. And so this is, just a few lessons that we learn from this symbolic gesture of picking up pebbles in Muzdalifah. The Hajjaj are picking up pebbles literally, and they're going to throw them literally, but it symbolizes a lot of things. It symbolizes that we arm ourselves against a shaitan and against evil and against the temptations of the shaitan and against the nafs and against the dunya. We arm ourselves. How do we arm ourselves? Again, it's figure of speech. We do so by, what we just mentioned, right? And so that is, perhaps the reflection for today. And the thoughts and comments, inshallah, will be open for you to share any questions or comments or reflections that you may have, inshallah. And anything good I said is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Any mistakes on my own, I ask you to forgive me for it. Barakallahu fikum, jazakumullah khairan, and we hope to hear from you, inshallah.
That's great. Brother Ahmed. If anyone has any questions, maybe we'll give it 1 to 2 minutes, and then if not, we can break off from Maghrib soon, inshallah. It seems we're good. Jazakallah khair once again, Brother Ahmed. That was our last session, so the series was great, very enjoyable, very informative things, and inshallah we will see you soon.
Inshallah, barakallahu fikum, jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.